Hello, I'm that geeky gamer, and welcome to my show. You know, certain names and companies within the gaming industry command some truly amazing powers. Seriously, if you want to guarantee yourself high sales numbers, just slap these people's names somewhere on the box and we'll all buy it. It's actually kinda sad, and at times it can just get ridiculous. Take, for example, one company that has truly thrived on this, perhaps more so than any other, namely Square. Now, don't get me wrong, I, like so many of you, absolutely love Square, and they have indeed made some of the best games in the industry, but contrary to popular belief, that doesn't mean that they're infallible. They can and indeed have made some unbelievable stinkers, and yet they always seem to get an inconceivable amount of praise and support for anything they do. Hell, most of the time, people declare their games brilliant, amazing, and the fucking salvation of all mankind way before they're even released. Yes, for whatever reason, Square seems to be sanctified in the eyes of gamers everywhere, and we're all willing to buy absolutely anything they release based on their name alone. And yes, when I say we all do this, that embarrassingly includes me. I as well have fallen victim to the spell of Square a few times, buying one of their products simply because their name happened to be on the cover. In fact, that's exactly what I did when I purchased the game we'll be looking at today. As I recall, I didn't really know all that much about it, I had barely seen any footage or trailers for it, and I probably wouldn't even have looked twice at it if it hadn't been for a tiny little logo on the edge of the cover. However, that doesn't necessarily make my purchase a bad one. So, to find out if this was a time when Square's name actually helped you pick out a decent game, or if it fooled people, i.e. me, to buy a gold-covered goat turd, I'm going to go over their very first PlayStation 2 release. That's right, you asked for it, so here it is. This is the Bouncer. Yes, the Bouncer. Apparently, several of you decided that this is what you wanted me to go over for this, my first Viewer's Choice episode, and I have to be honest, I'm not quite sure why. Don't get me wrong, there are definitely things about this game worth talking about, but as I've seen people both praise and condemn it, I really don't know what people are expecting me to do here. Well, at the risk of alienating a lot of you and/or getting several of you jumping up and down on my case, I'm going to say one thing right up front. I, for one, do not hate this game. There. I said it, and I meant it. But before you jump to conclusions, I don't exactly love this game either. No, I mean it. This game isn't really anything great, but I definitely don't agree with those who claim that it's one of the worst things ever either. It has some pretty cool concepts and a few fairly unique ideas, it's just that most of them haven't exactly been executed all that well. We'll get to all that eventually, but let's just start by looking at exactly what this game is for those who might not know. The Bouncer is, as I said before, Square's first ever game release on the PlayStation 2. It's a game about, obviously, a bouncer, or rather three of them, Sion Barzad, Volt Kruger, and Cole Lefo. So I guess that's 2 points against the game already. It's about a group of bouncers, because, you know, bouncers are by far the most fascinating people in the world, and the title of the game is wrong. It's called The Bouncer, when, quite clearly, it should be called The Bouncers. Why is the S such a huge problem? Okay, so technically the game is more about one of the bouncers, Sion, than the other two, but it definitely involves them, so I still think it should have been called The Bouncers. This is a fairly small problem though, so let's move on. This game is basically a beat-em-up with a fair amount of RPG elements thrown in. It's set in the fictional Edge City. Hey, isn't that a place in the DC universe? Huh. Maybe this game was actually like an early tie-in to Smallville or something. Anyway, in Edge City, we find our protagonists hanging out, or working, at their bar when Sion's girlfriend, Dominique Cross, drops by to give him a present, as it's apparently been 1 year since he started working there. Before they can really start celebrating though, a group of Special Forces agents from the antagonistic megacorporation known as the Mikado Group breaks in and kidnaps Dominique. And that's pretty much the setup. The girl has been kidnapped, and you have to go rescue her. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? Yep, the premise is about as revolutionary and unique as your average Mario game. To be fair though, the story does eventually become a lot more complex, complicated, and, well, just downright silly. You see, while it may start off as a simple heroes rescues maiden type scenario, it relatively quickly turns into this really rather ridiculous story involving humanoid robots, a mysterious shape-shifting lady, and, of course, a plot to take over the world.
Of course!
I don't really plan on going into that much more detail about the story, but trust me, it definitely gets a bit nuts after a while. However, that doesn't really matter so much as long as the actual game is decent enough, right? Well, I think this is where a lot of people will disagree with each other. Some will love the gameplay, others will absolutely hate it. Yet again though, I for one actually land somewhere in the middle. I find several of the concepts and ideas of the game to be pretty damn good, it's just that they aren't really executed all that well. For instance, you're allowed to choose which one of the 3 bouncers you want to play as before each enemy encounter, and based on your choice, the story will play out a little bit differently, the key word being little. You see, although I like this idea, and it is nice that the 3 characters actually do have their own personalities and fighting styles, most of the cutscenes and story elements remain pretty much the same no matter who you choose. There's only a few parts of the game where the cutscenes differ or you get some additional dialogue or something, so this system just isn't taken full advantage of. I'm not saying you should necessarily make 3 completely separate storylines, but you could at least differ the story elements enough to make it feel worthwhile to play through all of them, which they haven't really done here. Another good idea executed badly is the decision to have all 3 characters involved in battle. While you only control one character, the other 2 will be controlled by the AI. I do actually like this idea as it means that you can have some help with tougher enemies and that you won't necessarily have to take on everyone yourself. At least, that's what it should mean, but my fuck is this AI excruciatingly inept. They very rarely seem to do anything even remotely helpful, especially before you upgrade their characters, and they just end up getting in the way more than they help. Additionally, there's no co-op or single character option, which is just fucking stupid. I mean, as bad as the AI companions are, simply including a co-op mode or an option to play with only one character would pretty much have solved the problem. Then there's the actual fighting system. The bouncer pretty much consists of several confined spaces acting as stages for the battles, interspersed with several cutscenes tying them together. In the battles, you don't just get a regular side-scrolling or arena-style fight like in other fighting games, but rather a completely 3-dimensional stage where you're free to move as you wish. This may sound alright, but it does mean that it can be a little tricky to land your attacks, even if you manage to do them right. It doesn't exactly help that the characters usually move around at a slower pace than an elderly tortoise with osteoporosis either. Seriously, if they're not running towards the next enemy or area, they barely move no matter what you do. The actual combat moves can also be a bit of a hassle to pull off. Most of them work okay, but since several of them are pressure sensitive, meaning how hard you push the various buttons determines which moves you do, it's extremely easy to do the wrong move at the wrong time. The thing that absolutely cripples the battles though, is the mother-humping, toilet-gargling, feces-spewing butt plug of a camera. I honestly cannot believe just how bad they fucked this up. This camera simply refuses to focus on the things it needs to focus on. Okay, so at times it's not all that bad, but so many times you end up getting hit by something off screen or having your viewpoint blocked, and it just gets so insanely frustrating. It's also incredibly annoying and actually rather ridiculous that there are no continues in this game. No, I'm not joking. If you die in this game, you have to start again from where you last saved it, which is why it's recommended to save at every opportunity. Some may see this as a fairly minor problem, but it's just so unbelievably annoying to have to exit out to the main menu, go to your saved game, load it up, and wait for it to load every single time you die. Fair enough, if you use the right strategy and or you're just good enough, you probably won't die that many times anyway, but still, this is a major flaw. So yes, this game does have quite a few problems, but it also has several things that, actually, aren't half bad. For one thing, the graphics are pretty damn impressive. Yeah, I know that's pretty standard material for a Square game, but I still think it warrants mentioning. The music, although possibly a bit of an acquired taste, is also very good with several catchy and actually pretty awesome tracks. In addition, the game also includes a feature I personally am very, very fond of. It lets you choose either English or Japanese voiceovers. Yeah, I'm serious! I love it when developers do this, and I actually think it's really retarded that so many non-English games refuse to include the original voiceovers, even to this day! What the hell's the problem with using subtitles? Hell, in a lot of games, they actually dub the voiceovers and subtitle them! Hey, morons! You already have the subtitles! Why the fuck are you dubbing it? Just give us the original fucking voiceovers, you
silly sod!
Yeah, what he said. Okay, so I get that there are several reasons why certain developers decide not to include the original voiceovers in some regions, or why they subtitle the games anyway, but still, I find it inexcusable to not at least give us a choice of voiceovers, especially with the technology and disk space we have available today. Anyway, as I said, the Bouncer does include the Japanese voiceovers, but unfortunately I'm not quite sure that they're technically the original voiceovers. You see, the lip syncing was apparently done to the English voiceovers, as the Japanese voiceovers were incorporated later in the development process. Unfortunately, this makes the lip sync seem a bit off most of the time, as the mouth movements never really match either of the voiceovers. This isn't exactly a big problem, but it's definitely noticeable. Still, plus points for including the Japanese voiceovers anyway. The one thing this game does extremely well though, is definitely the upgrade system. Don't get me wrong, it's not perfect, but it's more than satisfactory, at least for me. While playing the game, you gain experience points that, after most encounters, can be used to upgrade your health, strength, defense, or to buy various new moves. It's up to you to decide what you want to upgrade at which point, meaning you have to figure out whether to save up your points for the more expensive upgrades, or use them on the cheaper upgrades a bit sooner. This system actually works really well, and it is kinda neat that each character has to be upgraded individually, even though that does mean that you can end up with a team consisting of one really strong fighter and one guy that dies before the fight even starts. Other than that, there really isn't all that much else to say about this game. I mean, I guess I could also mention that, if anything, it is a bit on the short side, with one playthrough of the story mode only taking about a couple of hours, 3 at most. But then again, you are supposed to play it several times, so I think it evens out. In any case, do I think I should have bought this game, or did I let the Square logo cloud my judgment? Well, as disappointing and uninteresting as this may be to some of you, I have to say that, overall, I'm glad I bought it. Yes, there are several things in this game that really don't work, and even a few of the good ideas this game have aren't necessarily executed terribly well, but for the most part, it is an enjoyable experience. The combat, although somewhat frustrating and cumbersome, is still pretty fun, and as ridiculous and extreme as the ragdoll physics can get, they mostly just add to the overall enjoyment of the game. The characters are actually quite endearing and memorable, at least for the most part. The story is fairly involving, even for as exceptionally silly as it can get, and I just really like the overall concept of this game. Combining an action-oriented fighting game with more of a story focus and RPG elements? Yeah, I think that sounds pretty good. I'm not quite sure if this was actually the first attempt at something like that, and I don't really think it's necessarily the best example of what you could do with that concept either, but overall, it handles it quite well. All in all, the Bouncer isn't the best, but it certainly isn't the worst either, not even just among Square's titles. There are plenty of things way worse than this, and there are things that are a million times better. I would say that it's worth giving a try, especially if you find it for a low enough price, but that it probably won't blow you away or anything either. It's so-so. Middle of the road. Decent. It's just okay. And that is actually okay. Well, I think I've said all I have to say here, so I'm just going to end this video by saying thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you check back for future episodes. Bye for now.